T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Today on Truth Today, we're going to be discussing what is Iran's future. We prayerfully are hoping that this regime will collapse, but what's next? What will happen? Can Iran transition back into a form of governance that will not be an enemy to the world as far as the government is concerned, as far as the regime is concerned? I'm going to be discussing this with a brilliant man who was introduced to me by our friend Annie Cyrus, Dr. Kangarlu, who teaches at Columbia University, who is actually the architect, the founder of Iran Project Phoenix, a think tank that focuses on what is next, how to transition out of the current regime into a representative form of government in Iran that, again, will not be an enemy to the world, but a friend to the world. So, folks, share the link. You don't want to miss this right now on Truth Today. Well, good morning, good afternoon, folks, depending on your time zone. Pastor Sharam Hadian here with Truth and Love Ministry, Truth Today. So glad you can join us. Of course, I'm back in the studio. We were on the road and part of our family vacation. So it's good to be back in the studio, good to be back home. And we have a great program for you today, a very thoughtful program that I'm excited for discussing with our guests today about the future of Iran. If you just happen to pop in with us, we're waiting for more folks to join us online. Remember that we are live streaming to Rumble, to YouTube, and to Facebook. And soon we're going to be live streaming to our X platform. Just in about a couple of weeks there, we'll be live streaming as well to there. So please, please, please share this link. We're going to answer hopefully a lot of questions today, a lot of confusion that is out there in the media, in the world, even among Christians about what is Iran, what will happen in Iran. Well, why should we even care about what is going on in Iran? What does that have to do with America? What does that have to do with the rest of the world? We're going to hopefully try to answer some of those questions with my guests today. But I just wanted to, by the way, again, our Rumble link, I forgot to mention here, this is our Rumble link. So please, if you're on Rumble, click that red button that says join so that you help build up our audience. As you guys know, YouTube is not a fan of our show or our content. So we are reluctantly on YouTube and Facebook. They still shadow ban us, but Rumble is our main platform. So please click like or join, like, and share on Rumble. And of course, if you want to know more about our ministry, you can go to tilministry.com. There's our website, tilministry.com. Check out all of our event calendars. By the way, I'll be traveling again, Bakersfield, California, Sunday, February 22nd. I'm going to be speaking there at the church. And then we go from there to Western Washington. I'll be there for about 5 or 6 events in Western Washington before we come back home. March, we'll be back in Dallas, Texas. We'll be in Pennsylvania. April, we'll be back in Texas again. And then May, we'll be back in Minnesota, Wisconsin. So we've got a busy spring coming up. Check out our events calendar on our website for that as we seek to wake up America to what's going on. So again, thank you all for joining us. Let us know where you're from. If you have questions for our guest, put it in the live chat section, and I will do my best to see if we can get to it. But I just want to quickly mention this before we bring our guest on, as I'm talking today about Iran's future with our guest, Dr. Arya Kangarlu, a brilliant man who teaches at Columbia University. We're going to be talking about his background, and he's the founder of what's called the Iran Phoenix Project. I have a hard time saying that word, a think tank that is focused on putting forth a very tangible plan for the transition and the restoration of the nation of Iran, the Persian people. So I'm excited to talk with him. But when we talk about the path forward, I just want to encourage you guys in this. You know, our program, we try to bring everything back to a biblical perspective. And I think that it's incredible that the God of the Bible has addressed Iran both in history. As you guys know, there's a rich history in the Bible of Persia. In fact, before Persia was the Medes. Before Medes was Elam. And I've said this many times, and I think a lot of Christians don't study their Bible. Elam goes back all the way to the story of Noah. Elam was one of the sons of Noah, the line of Shem, all the way back to the story of Noah and the genealogy. So there is an incredible history and hand of God amongst the Persian people over not only Persia's 3,000+ year history, but more than 4,500+ years of biblical history, world history, when it comes to population and God's plans. So Iran is actually mentioned not only in the context of the Old Testament, Persia, it's mentioned in the context of future. Because one, there is a prophecy about Persia, some part of Persia being a part of a coalition that is going to come against the nation of Israel in Ezekiel chapter 38, the prophet Ezekiel. But there is, again, a lesser known prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 49 that talks about the rebuilding of Elam, mentions Elam by name, which is the southwestern portion of modern day Iran. And this is where the rich history of not only the Persian Empire, Persepolis, but it's also biblical history, back to the story of Esther, back to the time when Israel was in captivity under Persian rule, back to the decree of King Cyrus. So Jeremiah 49 speaks of a time when God will break the bow, the might of Elam, scatter its people, and then regather them for a time that they will then actually rule and reign with him. This is incredible. It talks about there's going to be a throne of God in Elam. The only other place that God mentions a throne is in Jerusalem. But here you have the only other mention of God's throne in the time of restoration that is in Elam, in modern day Iran. So just perspective, there's no doubt that God has a plan and a future for the Persian people and for Iran. And with that foundation, I want to then bring on my guests today. Dr. Arya, Dr. Kangarlu, welcome to Truth Today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know we got connected through our my friend Annie Cyrus, and I know you were on also with Jamie Glazoff, and I'm so glad that people are hearing your message, hearing about this. First of all, would you just give us a brief background of who you are, maybe your time in Iran, then your time in America, just briefly, because I know we have so much to cover today about what is the future of Iran. So thank you again for being with us.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for inviting me, and it's good to be with you and your wonderful audience. Yeah, I was born in Iran, and I did my undergraduate in physics in Iran until the time of revolution, about a few months before the Pahlavi regime falls apart and Ayatollah Khomeini comes to the country. I decided that I had to leave. So I left the country and I came to the United States, and I continued my education here. I did my graduate work here. I did my PhD in nuclear physics. And for a few years, for about 8-9 years, I was a professor at the University of Dayton in Ohio. And then I decided to make a transition from physics into medicine, and moved to Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, where we built the world's most powerful MRI machine operating at a field of 8 Tesla. And with that machine, we could actually acquire exquisite images of live human brain, non-invasively. And then later on, the technology called functional MRI, while the traditional MRI, the standard MRI, only takes pictures of the structure, inner structure of the body, while functional MRI actually gives you a picture of the actual activity and the function. And as you know, the function of the brain is what we call the mind. So we actually developed a technology of taking a picture of the mind, not just the brain. And then this technology of what is so-called fMRI or functional MRI was so powerful and revealed so much about the inner working and inner function and how different brain regions talk to each other, that it became very useful in the world of psychiatry, because, unlike the rest of medicine, psychiatry is a disorder of the mind, while, for instance, neurology is a disorder of the brain. Neurologists use MRI, but psychiatrists never used any imaging technology, because the understanding at the time was that you couldn't take a picture of the human mind. But now we take a picture of the human mind. And by comparing the mind of patients with psychiatric disorders and people with no history of psychiatric disorders, we can pinpoint the areas of the brain where basically those regions fall out of pace with the rest of their partners in the brain, what we call networks. And this way, we've been able to actually find the trademark and the signature of multiple psychiatric disorders like depression, anxiety, OCD, and so on. And not only actually diagnosing them based on the specific dysfunctions in specific regions of the brain, but also being able to non-invasively and non-pharmacologically treating them. So that's what I do professionally. But throughout these years, because of the conditions that you just alluded to in your introduction piece, Iranians have been really involved in politics, because, my life was uprooted very early in life. I didn't want to leave Iran, in 1978, but I was forced to leave because I knew what was coming. I knew that fundamentalist Muslims are conquering. Really, this was the second conquest of Persian Empire. The first one being at the time of Prophet Muhammad, when Iran was a thriving empire, Sassanid Empire, and the Muslims invaded and they ransacked Iran, and for 14 centuries, Iranians were not allowed to speak their language, practice their own religion of Zoroastrianism. I don't know whether your audience are familiar with Zoroastrianism, but that was the religion of the Persian Empire and the practicing religion of Iranian people. But then the Islamic Revolution happened in 1979. And since then, basically the world, certainly the region of the Middle East, has not been the same. The Islamists who came to power in Iran, they've been basically putting the entire region, and if they could, the entire world on fire. And I've been fighting that gang of thieves and the oppression that the Islamic Republic has subjected the Iranian people to. And the Phoenix Project that you referred to at the beginning was part of that effort. I've been working very closely with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi in basically telling the world that there are Iranians who basically don't subscribe to the mentality, to the worldview, to the perception, and to the theology of the Iranian regime. And a vast majority of Iranians are law-abiding, loving human beings who want to have good relations with neighbors. They want to have good relationship with the world, with Europe, with America. Actually, I think as we speak, I can dare to say that Iran is one of the most pro-America, pro-Western nation on the face of the earth, including America.
Yes,
and
yes,
including
yes.
Europe.
Yes.
And that might come as a surprise to some of your audience. But as you ask me more questions, I would be able to give you more details why I believe, Iran is such a unique country and why it would become, and as it was before the revolution, one of the greatest allies of America in the future challenges that we confront.
Well, thank you for that. First of all, yeah, I mean, what you do professionally is just incredible. It's brilliant. The formation of technology to then understand the intricacy of the human body, which is still so many things are a mystery, right? But it's incredible as technology catches up. So thank you for that incredible introduction. Again, I wanted to just give, this is the website where if they want to go and learn about the professional aspect of what you do, this is correct, right?
Yes.
Neurotherapeutics,
yes.
NYC, because you teach at Columbia University in the state of New York. And so people can check that out. There's so many questions I have with what you mentioned with your backstory. Yeah, we left Iran right around the same time. My dad, who was in the military under the Shah of Iran, it was 1978 when that fall, when I remember as a young child, him sitting us down and saying, we have to go, now is the time. I know you've covered this before, but people have to understand that what happened in Iran, which is really what's happening in America. I was actually giving a presentation last night where I said to people, maybe people in America don't understand that there is a movement afoot here in America to create that civil war, to create an overthrow. In Iran, tell me your experience of what you saw before 1979, because as you just mentioned, history calls it an Islamic revolution, but we really know that it was an overthrow. It was a coup. They committed a coup because there was, and my dad would talk to me about those things where he saw it first in the universities with the introduction of Marxism and communism. Then, you saw it in to some extent in the media. He saw it in the military, where they started seeing that infiltration. Of course, when Jimmy Carter became president in 1977, the relationship with Iran changed. In my opinion, they betrayed Iran. They betrayed the Shah. But just give me maybe your perspective of pre-1979, because I think that's a lesson for America right now. Is we see would you agree, we see a lot of the same forces trying to overthrow America. For those who think, well, oh, that was Iran, that won't happen here.
There is a lot of truth to what you say regarding similarities between Iran, pre-revolution Iran, and present-day United States. And I'm going to get into probably gory details of why I think these two nations have the same destiny, in spite of the fact that in the last 47 years, the Islamic regime in Iran has been a staunch enemy of the United States. But the Iranian people are not. And actually, one of the biggest mistakes committed by the Islamic regime in Iran was the unprovoked hostility that they directed to United States and to Israel. And I would dare to speculate that those unprovoked hostilities will bring them down eventually, because they go exactly opposite of what Iranian people want and what Iranian people feel. Iranians because of their pre-Islamic empire, because of that history, they all see themselves in the image of an empire. And today, the sitting empire is the United States of America. So Iranians see themselves in the image of America. There's no reason for any hostility towards the United States. When I was in Iran before revolution, we established the first intercontinental flight from Tehran to New York, the longest flight at the time in 1976. And the extent of relationship between the two countries was very, very intimate and broad. The militaries, we had very close relationship between the U.S. military and the Iranian military. A vast majority of the Iranian senior officers were trained in the European and the American military academies in the West Point. My own father-in-law at the time, was a 4-star general who unfortunately was executed after the revolution. And a lot of, economic, military, and scientific interaction. My own university, the university I started my undergraduate, was at the time it was called Arya Mer University of Technology. Today it's called Sharif University of Technology. It was in a close relationship between MIT, Harvard, Uppsala, Sorbonne, and Cambridge. So we had very good economy. The last 15 years of the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran, we had Iran was experiencing a double-digit economic growth. In other words, Iran of mid-60s to late 70s was today's China, today's South Korea, double-digit economic growth. So the revolution that happened in 1979 wasn't really an economically inspired revolution, because most of the revolutions in the world are economically induced or economically inspired revolution. This one wasn't. This one was I would say a philosophical and a more moral revolution. And by that I mean the Pahlavi government, both the Shah's father and himself, and the Shah himself, they were really trying to bring modernity into the country. The same phenomenon that caused reformation in Christianity in the 16th and the 17th century, and eventually Christianity became the modern religion that we can see being practiced in the United States and in Europe. He was trying to bring that into the society without provoking the religious fundamentalist. He was actually
Islamic.
Exactly. The Islam, without provoking the Islamic fundamentalist religions. I mean, people like Ayatollah Khomeini, who stirred up, a lot of unrest against the government of the Shah. But the Shah was very accommodating to him. Unlike today's Islamic regime, that they really deal with their opponents with iron fist. You just heard that in the last month. In the month of January, the uprising in Iran, the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime in Iran, basically massacred the people on the streets. Anywhere from 30 to 60,000 people were mowed down on the streets using military-grade, machine guns. But the Pahlavis were not like that. He basically, when Ayatollah Khomeini became critical of the government and started instigating unrest in Iran, he sent him to exile in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, and he was there for 15 years before he came back to Iran during the revolution in 1979. So this was really the Islamic revolution of 1979 was a clash between a fundamentalist Islamic morality, whatever that is, and we can see that morality or that philosophy has been governing in Iran for the last 47 years, has committed all kinds of atrocities, not only against the Iranian people, even in Syria, when during the Arab Spring in Syria, when the Syrian people rose up against the brutality of the Assad regime, it was the Islamic regime in Iran that sent a butcher by the name of General Qasem Soleimani to Syria, and they killed anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million Syrians. So the mayhem that they created in Iran wasn't really it didn't stay confined in Iran. In Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, and basically the whole Middle East has been on fire since this regime came to power. And I think it's time for the United States. And like you mentioned the role of Jimmy Carter at the time. Jimmy Carter was really, I don't know whether he did it intentionally or unintentionally. I can't imagine doing it intentionally, because the Shah was a staunch ally of the United States, and the Iranian military at the time was really guaranteeing the safety and the security of the flow of oil from the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. And we basically made sure that, the Middle East stayed friendly towards the United States. And after the revolution, after the 1979, in the last 46, 47 years, the Iranian regime has put the entire region on fire.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
the United States, so the fact that we constantly hear that the Fifth Fleet and the Sixth Fleet and this aircraft carrier strike group and that aircraft carrier strike group, the armada that the President Trump is referring to, the reason why we need to send military hardware and soldiers into the region is because we really don't have anyone who could really maintain the safety and the security of the international waterways on our behalf. There is no
Right.
Shah of Iran there anymore. But his son, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, I think he's an ideal candidate
Mhm.
to go to Iran and establish a regime, a government, a democratic government
Right.
who is very friendly to the United States, but at the same time very strong, militarily strong, and a close ally of the United States. And that can really serve not only our safety and military interests, but also our economic interests. And
Mhm.
in the next round, I will tell you what has happened in the last 40 years outside Iran and the Middle East that requires a drastic rethinking of our foreign policy. And
Mhm.
thank God that President Trump is doing exactly that. And hopefully, if he can do what I think he's capable of doing and what he intends to do, I think we can arrive at a very safe and prosperous shore soon.
Agreed that I agree with everything that you just stated there. And I think that history is so important. Again, when we talk about what has been our foreign policy, what has been our attitude here in the United States. As I mentioned earlier, and you mentioned this, that was my dad's role. My dad was a liaison officer actually in the military. So he would routinely be in the United States doing joint training with the US Army. Of course, that all changed again under the Carter administration. And like you said, it's hard to know all the motives, but I would say that it started before then, because most people do not understand that the Shah was bringing sort of a Persia, we say America first. The way that I try to explain to people is the Shah was bringing a Persia first mentality back to Iran to not only liberate, as you say, the Persian people from the Islamic identity that is not ours. You said, I have to remind people, Persia was around long before Islam. And, you have a 3,300 year history of Persia. Islam is 1,400 years. Islam subjugated, Islam conquered. And now it has, done it in modern time for the last 47 years. But I remember, people ask me all the time, what do you remember about your childhood in Iran? And I said, everything that I remember was so positive, was so incredible, was so, as you said, the economic situation in Iran. My dad was flourishing. Even when he came out of the military, he was flourishing in business. The opportunities, the modernity, the military, the travel, the education, everything was being reformed, as is known as the White Revolution. I tend to think, though, that when somehow it always comes back to money and power, right? When the Shah nationalized the oil in Iran that was being controlled by British Petroleum and the other companies that were outside of Iran, I think that became part of the threat. I think now the Shah becomes an existential threat because he is looking at the sovereignty of Iran, the sovereignty of the Iranian people. And as you said, that was leading a movement where there was a move towards secularism within the Islamic world, and Iran flipping has moved the Islamic world towards fundamentalism since 1979. Do you agree?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
now, why do, I had a conversation with you last week, and you mentioned that because on paper or on media, we see the Arab Muslim nations opposed, at least on face, to any regime change in Iran. I argue part of that is, of course, because they have to save face that they can't have a free Iran, because a free Iran would be free of Islam. The people have rejected Islam royally. We have about 8% mosque attendance. Even the internal polling of the government last year showed only, I think, 32% or so of the people identify now as Shia. More majority are identifying as going back to Zoroastrianism. Of course, there's a growing Christian population in Iran, the Kurds, the Baha'i. So this is, the government itself admitted that they've shut down 75,000 mosques, that they're empty. So the message that I was telling this audience last night when I was speaking, the message of the Iranian people to America is, we were subjugated under Islamic theocratic rule, and it sucks. we hate it. You got to reject it in the West, in America, in Europe. So what do you see as you gave me an interesting perspective of what you think the Arab Muslim leaders are really thinking behind the scenes versus, in front of the camera, where they got to sort of play the Islamic game. Just give us, our audience, that perspective, maybe they would be more in support of a regime change and a free Iran than maybe they're letting on. Yes.
In reality and behind closed doors, like I told you on the phone, they hate this regime. They hate everything about it, because, there are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world, 90% of which are Sunni Muslims. And Iran is the only Shiite-dominated country in the region and in the world.
Right.
The rest of the Shiites are really spread out in south of Iraq and in Azerbaijan, and maybe a few million in Turkey and in Afghanistan. But Iran is the majority Shiite, the only majority Shiite country in the world. And the Shiite, so if you can imagine a religion that the highest position in that religion doesn't belong to the prophet of that religion, that would be the Shiite religion. Christianity, Jesus is the highest authority. In Judaism, Moses is the highest authority. In Sunni Islam, Prophet Muhammad is the highest authority. In Shiite, mysteriously, the descendants of the prophet who have Iranian connection are more revered and wield more authority. And the believers, including the religious authority and the supreme leader in Iran, they have more allegiance to the descendants of the prophet with their Iranian connection. And that is something that, almost all Sunni Muslims, they consider that a deviation from the right path of Islam. And that's exactly what the religious leaders, as well as the political leaders in the Middle East, that's the reservation and the suspicion they have about the Iranian regime. And they think about their extraterritorial agenda, the fact that the supreme leader in Iran not only claims the leadership over the world of Shiites. I mean, the world of Shiite is a pretty small world, includes Iran and a few partial countries in the Middle East, but also he, blatantly considers himself the leader of the Islamic world, which is the Sunni world as well as the Shiite world. And these people, I mean, in the private parties, they laugh at such a claim. They know that there is no truth. I mean, the supreme leader is not even doesn't even have enough popularity and allegiance among the Shiites of the world, among the Shiites of Iran. He's probably, not only he's not the most popular, but he's probably the most hated figure in Iran, religious or otherwise. And this is really one of the biggest ironies of this world, that, this regime came to power with the mission, with the proclaimed mission of spreading the message of Islam. Not
Right.
only they failed miserably in that declared mission, they also rendered Iranians rejecting the religion of Shiite. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
Iranians are one of the probably most secular societies on earth. And
Yeah.
Christianity, I think, if there is one spot in the world that Christianity is growing like wildfire,
Yes.
that is Iran.
Yes.
Of course, the government suppresses
Right.
any public exhibition of affinity or practice of Christianity by Muslims, and the change of religion is confronted with a certain death sentence. If it wasn't for that suppression, I think the indication for the popularity of Christianity in Iran would be everywhere, and American
Yes.
people and Europeans and the rest of the world would be able to see that for themselves. But that's a fact that cannot be suppressed forever.
Right.
Eventually, the people of Iran, as they showed in their January uprising, the January of 2026 uprising, they are prepared to pay for the change of government by their lives.
By their
And
life,
they did
yeah.
pay in thousands, in throes. And if this government is going to go, whether it's going to go tomorrow or next week or next month, and by its departure from the political scene in the Middle East, I think the whole world will change. Not just the
Yes.
Middle East will change, but the
Yes.
whole world
Yes.
will change.
Yes.
Because and this is exactly what I wanted to get into. This has to do with the way that the rest of the world has been kind of dealing with its own crisis in the last half a century. I mean, as the world came out of the World War II, the United States was the clear winner of the World War II. And something, in addition to defeating the Nazis during World War II, a transition happened in the free world. Basically, the empire, when the Europe was going into the World War II, British Empire were the dominant empire of the world. By the end of the world, the Brits were really they really took a backseat to American leadership, to the free world, and America became the replacement for the British Empire. And between 1945, when the war ended, and 1990, almost in a period of about 45 to 50 years, United States was the superpower, at least in the free world, in the capitalist world, in the liberal democracy world. But we had a primary mission during that time. During our empire tenure, we had a mission, and that was fighting the evil of communism in Russia and in the socialist bloc. And we did that. I think we did a very good job, but at a very high price. We defeated communism, and the way we defeated it was by, there were two superpowers within the world of communism. One was Russia, another one was China. So Nixon in 1975 and his brilliant foreign minister, Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, he came up with this brilliant idea of divide and conquer. So we approached the Chinese and we told them that if you stay away from those Russians, we are going to allow flow of capital and technology to your country, and we basically will help you to develop yourself and get rid of all this miserable economy that you've been experiencing since you adopted communism. I mean, China at the time had a population 400 million opium addicts, and what Nixon and Kissinger offered China was a no-brainer. The Chinese took that offer gladly, and in the pursuing 10 to 15 years, China's door for business with the American companies opened. And we had a large number of American companies going to China, actually closing shop in America and moving to China because the terms of operation and the business environment was more profitable, basically. Very low labor cost, very highly educated population in China, but basically no jobs. So American companies arrive, they have this army of engineers and scientists who are paid $1 or $2 a day, and they could hire them at basically no cost, almost no cost to the manufacturers and to these companies. So what you saw, what we saw, what the world saw between the 1980s and the 2000, in that span of 20 years, was really the performance by all the Americans and Europeans companies who were migrating to China, taking advantage of highly educated labor force and low-cost labor force, and very pro-business environment and regulations. And so the miracle, the Chinese miracle, was really because of that deal that Nixon and Kissinger managed to get the Chinese to agree with it. But something else happened at the same time. The Americans basically were hoping that, if we allow and if we can help economic development in China, eventually political development, which is a code name for democracy, will eventually arrive in the country. And for a while, it was going like that. The Chinese economic development was gradual. Political development, we saw the rise to power of a new generation of Chinese leaders like Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, and we saw a kind of modernization and liberalization of the political stronghold that the Chinese Communist Party was holding over power for the previous 30 years. And it appeared that, the Nixon's theory and Nixon's expectation was being met. Economic development in parallel with the political development, until a fellow by the name of Xi Jinping came along, who was a hardcore communist, and started changing course, started taking all the economic dividends of the growth of the previous 20, 30 years, and tried to build a military that was far beyond the national need of China as a country, and started projecting power outside the Chinese, traditional sphere of influence. And that was when the United States decided that, the China is going exactly the opposite of the path that America expected it to. And fortunately, this was during the first term of Trump administration. Trump recognized this very well and started, dealing with the so-called China problem, and put China at the top of America's foreign policy issues, and South China Sea as one of the hot spots of the world. Prior to that, probably the hottest spot in the world was the Persian Gulf, and the fact that, as I told you, in the departure of the Shah and the fall and the collapse of the Pahlavi dynasty, basically the Middle East was being run by the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic in Iran was throwing its weight around and controlling it. They were proud of claiming that, they were controlling 5 capital cities in the Middle East, and they were right. From Lebanon to Syria to Iraq to Yemen, and then the United States really was heartbroken. They knew that they had to divide their forces between different hotspots in the world, and Persian Gulf. While the Persian Gulf was in dire attention of the United States, and while prior to the revolution, America had one of its biggest naval bases in Iran. After Iran, they had to move to Qatar and to Bahrain, and they could never really get the kind of support from the local people and the projection of power that Iran was helping the United States to establish in the region. But to make it long story short, now the United States, this is the first Trump administration, now the United States had to deal with the negative fallouts of Nixon doctrine. The fact that we helped China to become the China that today the rest of the world is attributing the Chinese economic miracle to China, not knowing the role that America played in Chinese successful model. But now the fact that the Chinese were taking the dividends of this American generosity and building a military to confront and challenge America, if not the rest of the world, at least in the South China Sea, in and the Pacific Basin. The American policymakers had to redraft and rethink their policy of how to deal with China. And I think the United States, under Trump's leadership in the first term, he confronted that problem by reinvesting more resources in the military buildup. As you know, during Clinton and George W. Bush, we constantly cut down on the military defense budget.
Right.
And Trump started regrowing the defense budget, supporting military. And unfortunately, his mission was really cut abruptly when Biden came to office. But then again, in the second term, as soon as he arrived on the January 20th of 2025, he hit the ground running. He assigned Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense, and the rebuilding of the military and re-educating and re-establishing what Pete Hegseth calls the ethos, the warrior ethos in the Defense Department. And and the rest is details. I think the success he had with Venezuela, which I think for many decades to come, they are going to teach how best you can deal with an enemy at low cost. No American life was lost. No hardware was damaged, and this was one of the most brilliant military operation to rid that country of the dictator who had really destroyed that beautiful country, rich country, resourceful country. And now he's dealing with the Islamic Republic, that I'm hoping that he would be able to come up with just as brilliant of a solution to the demise of the Islamic regime. And if he does that, then he would be free to go and deal with the real problem. And it's exactly there, replacing China, because we are really going through an economic divorce with China. And this economic divorce could become very costly, because in the last 30, 40 years that our economies have been intertwined, we have grown dependent on the Chinese cheap products that come to this country. Everything you buy on Amazon, not everything, but probably more than 90% of the stuff you buy on Amazon comes from China. And for the same factors that cheap labor and the availability of an army of very well educated engineers and scientists, production cost in China is much lower than the United States, and American consumers have been a beneficiary of that. But changing this path is very costly, very complicated, and the United States needs to replace China as world factory with another China. There is really no another China. We were hoping that India would be that replacement for China, but India has been not playing ball with the United States, to say the least. So the United States, under Trump's leadership, he came up with the idea of replacing China with a bunch of smaller countries who would be able to basically act as a factory, being able to manufacture products at a much lower cost than is possible in the United States. So we have identified Mexico as one of those countries, Indonesia. Iran is probably one of the countries that would be able to single-handedly play a huge role in this transition from intertwining of the American-Chinese economy through, and basically help us to navigate the treacherous waters of this economic divorce between the United States and China. So Iran, a free Iran, can play a huge role in stabilizing our economy and avoiding $3,500 iPhones that would be, in the immediate future if we cannot.
So if we could just transition to that for the sake of our time, because I'm glad you brought it back to the role that, again, people ask me all the time, why should the United States be involved in Iran? Why should they get it? And of course, I was of the opinion at the beginning of the uprisings that the U.S. didn't necessarily need to be involved if Israel was going to do what they had started back last June with their level of infiltration into the country, their apparatus, their intelligence. But now that, the president has said help is on the way, and their involvement, and of course, as you mentioned, the flotilla, the armada, although part of that, of course, is predicated upon the fact that the Arab nations are not playing ball, at least on paper. They're saying you can't use our bases. Let's talk about the Iran Phoenix Project as the founder of this and your support, because very quickly there seems to be pockets within U.S. foreign policy that support MEK, that support an alternative, because I think most people would agree, as you said, this regime cannot last, whether it's a few weeks or a few more years, depending on the lifeline. I mean, we just saw that the Russians said that they're going to put inflow of cash into this regime. They just did that, earlier or towards the end of this last week, that now, Russia is going to try to maybe prop up the regime. So it seems like the only way the regime kind of keeps going is if they're given a lifeline, whether the Europeans seem to be going more in the other direction because of the massacres, as you said, because of the fact that they've labeled now the IRGC as a foreign terrorist organization. The tune has changed a little bit. What do you see as this battle? Because if anybody has eyes to see, nobody in the streets of Iran and nobody outside of Iran is chanting, "Long live MEK." They're saying Javid Shah.
Yes.
Long live the Shah. Pahlavi will return. So as one who supports the Crown Prince, can we very quickly talk about maybe just the dynamics of why do you think that MEK is even in the picture? And for those who don't remember, the MEK Mujahideen is Mujahideen al-Khalq, depending on how you say it. They changed their name. They claim now they're the National Council of Resistance of Iran. They're not any longer what they used to be. My friend Brandon House interviewed a child soldier who came out of MEK, who describes it as a cult, that there was absolutely a cult, and that they worked to undermine the Shah back in the 60s and 70s. In fact, one of my cousins was part of MEK in Iran. He was one of the people that was working to claim that the Shah was a puppet of the US. And within 6 months, 8 months, 10 months of the overthrow and the revolution, he was blacklisted. and he had to flee Iran because they were going to come and arrest him. The Muslims don't usually they don't play nice with the Marxists once they take over, it seems, this kind of red-green. But briefly tell us about MEK. And then I want to get to, this is the front page of the Iran Phoenix Project. And just for folks who later on want to go read it, here's the website. Why do you believe that this is a better alternative than what is being propped up by some, even on the right, like Newt Gingrich, Rudy Giuliani, and others, who are saying, no, MEK is the one who should take over? Because I would argue, based on everything you said, that the United States has not had a great track record when we sort of try to prop up. You said it, there's consequences. We do something that we think is good in the moment, and then we realize, oops, we have consequences. And China now is, according to everything you're saying, that I agree with, is one of these massive consequences that has happened. So just maybe go into that MEK versus Reza Pahlavi. What would be the difference in your mind?
Well, there is no comparison as far as the Iranian people are concerned. MEK,
right.
if you can imagine, there is an entity more hated than the Islamic regime in Iran, is MEK.
Wow.
MEK is an Islamic Marxist. Just think about that. That's an oxymoron.
Right.
an Islamic Marxist organization, terrorist organization that was established about 10 years before the revolution. And their call to fame was assassinating American businessmen and American military attaches in Iran. I mean, how patriots like Mark Pompeo and Giuliani
Yeah, these guys.
and Bolton can have anything good to say about this is beyond me.
Yeah.
Of course, I can imagine that $50,000 per speech can
Yeah.
go a long way
Yeah.
to change your allegiance,
Right.
But Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi doesn't have that kind of money to throw around, and he doesn't need to. When the people are spending with their lives to chant his name and call his name in the streets of Iran, his job is to manage and help those people to rid themselves of the Islamic regime in Iran as quick as possible. But the MEK has gone a different path. They are trying to establish some kind of a relationship with some former officials. You will never see MEK inviting any sitting officials from European governments or from American government. All former officials who, for some reason, they are nostalgic about the attention they used to receive when they were in office, and the kind of money that the MEK is throwing around, that is really bringing them some hired guns. Otherwise, when it comes to Iranian people, and the battle, when it comes down to who is going to win the hearts and minds of Iranian people, because this battle between the Iranian people and the regime is going to go down to the wire, and people will fight it every step of the way, and they will pay the price, as they have shown that they are bravely capable of doing that. And I don't think MEK has any role to play in the future of Iran. And the kind of images that you're showing is the kind of Iran that we were used to and we were brought up. And in the last 47 years, that country has been hijacked and has been occupied by some Islamic terrorist groups called Islamic Republic. And hopefully with the correct decisions that I'm hoping to be made, especially since Bibi is visiting the president today, and through their conversation, they would be able to guide the foreign policy of the United States toward the direction
Do you think Israel is nervous right now with these talks? The talks in Oman on Friday, and again, I want you to describe, if you can. I don't want to get away from as we're talking about the future of Iran, because you guys have an extensive plan. If people go to the website, you have an extensive plan. What Reza Pahlavi calls the 100-day initial transition plan, and then potentially, if I understand right, maybe about a 2+ year plan to getting to a actual free elections, which anybody that has known Iran knows there's been no free election for 47 years. Every year election is rigged by the Supreme Council, the Guardian Council. They pick the candidates, they determine the outcome. There has been no free elections in Iran. That's nonsense if anybody thinks that. Are you concerned with these talks?
I'm not that concerned, because I think that President Trump has a very good understanding about where he wants to take America, and the policy of America first means that America needs the best possible partners as we are navigating away from the partnership we had with China in the last 47 years. And there are very few countries who make this perfect match for partnership with the United States as we are divorcing China and entering into new alliances. You can see, you saw what has happened between the United States, between Trump and Europeans. So you can see that the United States is really reassessing its all partnership, its all alliance. NATO is, for all practical purposes, he has withdrawn the United States from NATO, and left the security of Europe to Europeans. And, in his official papers, he's now slowly and gradually referring to NATO as European NATO, which means it's going to be a European entity, because the United States has bigger fish to fry, elsewhere, namely South China Sea. and needs new partners,
Mm.
and I think he has a very good understanding of that. And his partner, Bibi Netanyahu, I think the man, no one understands the Islamic regime in Iran better than Bibi Netanyahu.
Right.
And
right.
I think the president's heart is in the right place. Thank God that we have these two men at the same time in office, one in the United States, one in Israel. And thank God for the fact that, they understand each other. And I think no matter what the Arab leaders tell Trump, ultimately, when it comes to advice about how to deal with the Islamic regime in Iran, he is going to listen to Bibi Netanyahu. And that's very fortunate. And I know exactly what Bibi is going to tell him.
So let's talk about the transition. Let's look ahead as hope. We're hopeful. Again, I think we left Iran right around the same time. We left December of 1978. We're hopeful for the day that we can return back to our nation, visit our nation, be productive as far as our birth nation. Of course, I'm grateful to be a citizen of America. I'm grateful for everything America has allowed me, including my faith. I mean, this is where I became a Christian. As you said, it is amazing to see the growth of Christianity inside Iran at great cost. It's one of the most persecuted countries on the planet because of this regime. And I'm also glad earlier you mentioned, people don't understand, for example, Zohran Mamdani in New York City. You live in the state of New York. You talked about an Islamic Marxist. That's what he describes himself as. Mm-hmm. And yet it's an oxymoronic statement. He's a 12er. He espouses the Shia 12er eschatology, where they literally believe that they're going to cause the chaos until the Mahdi, their Messiah, supposed Messiah, returns. Of course, the good news is that the true Messiah will return. But what do you see as if the United States? People ask me, Sharon, what do you expect America to do? Do you think that just a few bombs can destroy? Can you maybe highlight 4, 5, 6 things that you would see as the immediate steps that the United States needs to take right now, besides just hitting targets that they could be doing? And then briefly, what would be the next steps for Reza Pahlavi to be able to return to Iran?
The 12-day war that happened between June 13 to June 25th showed the world that the Islamic regime is nothing but a paper tiger. All the threats, all their bravado, all their big talks about, the Supreme Leader the other day, in one of the rare occasions where he dared to come from his underground bunker, he had a 4-minute speech in which he said, if America attacks us, we are going to put the entire region on fire. And I just heard, a conversation from General Robert Harvard, the deputy commander of CENTCOM back during George Bush. He said that this government doesn't have any means of delivering under threat. And I absolutely agree with him. General Harvard is one of those rare generals who has a very good understanding, Admiral Harvard, very good deep understanding of Iran. He has lived in Iran. He speaks Persian, and he's been following Iran's situations almost on daily basis. And, when he says they don't have means of delivering under threat, I think the president, actually in his first term, President Trump offered the Secretary of Defense to Robert Harvard, and I don't know why it didn't happen, but so the relationship is already there, and he can offer very good insight when it comes to what to do with Iran. Another very insightful former general is General Jack Keane,
right? Yes,
whom I've seen. Every time this man talks, he's talking from the bottom of my heart. He has a very good understanding of the makeup of this regime, their unpopularity, and their empty threat that they're leveling against the United States. There is nothing they can do. The United States, the 12-day war basically showed the president how to deal with them.
Okay. Okay.
Netanyahu
Okay.
showed us
Right.
that if you maintains, and the United States military is, if not 100 times, at least 10 times more powerful and resourceful than Israeli military is. And the United States can do 12-day war multiplied by 100 in a very short time. We have a lot of hardware in the region, in the Indian Ocean, in the Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea, and in the Mediterranean. We have almost 3 aircraft carrier battle groups, and I think the president already has a plan on his desk of how to deal with this government. This government must be overthrown by the U.S. military, because that credit, the credit of overthrowing this regime in Iran, once it's given to U.S., Iran becomes an inseparable part of America, and that's good for both, good for democracy in Iran and good for economy in America.
Because I was going to ask you that question of whether you think that it's the Israeli strikes, because that's part of what I'm wondering is Netanyahu coming over, is Bibi coming over today to say, listen, because last week when we saw those explosions inside Iran that they claimed was gas leaks, in 8, 9 different cities, my heart sort of sprang up a little bit, thinking, because that reminded me of the 12-day war. That reminded me of kind of how things started back in June, where we saw these internal strikes, sort of internal sabotaging that was going on, probably right by their Mossad assets inside the country that had been there for years. I mean, they're deeply infiltrated in Iran. But then it kind of, now there's this lull, now negotiations, and I don't know. I maybe I'm a little bit more of a just looking at the situation as is, and so every time I hear negotiations, it just kind of makes your stomach kind of sick, because you're like, what deal? What deal are we talking about? What are we talking about here? But so you're saying you think it really needs to be the United States that takes this regime down. And one would argue, not only for current, because the president said, we're locked and loaded, help is on the way, we're coming, go to the streets. And there is that responsibility. The Bible says, let your yes be yes. So the president said, we're coming, we're coming. And now one would argue there is a moral obligation for him to follow through. But secondly, what about, you said earlier, what about all the blood that is on the hands of this regime of Americans that have been killed?
Exactly.
And so, Pan Am, who people forget Pan Am Flight 47, that ultimately more than likely came back to Iran, that Iran did that. They were blaming Gaddafi and they were blaming Libya. And I still think that Iran had a hand in that. We know October 7th and the coordination with Hamas, and the Iranian public TV broadcast the paragliders that Hamas was using a year before that. And people say,
they probably paid for it.
They probably paid for it. So it's interesting you're saying you think America has to do it so that then immediately tightens the relationship and then creates the environment of a unified force, which obviously Reza Pahlavi also said immediately they would sign the Cyrus Decree with Israel as well.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
The 12, if it wasn't for the fact that President Trump asked Netanyahu to stop his operations in Iran on the 12th day, actually Netanyahu later on said that 150 jet fighters were already halfway there.
Wow.
When President called and asked them to turn around and go back to their bases in Israel. If that operation sustained for another week, the regime would have fallen. I mean, even for another day, who knows? So first, the 12-day war is our guiding light for how to deal with this regime. And 12-day war tells us what this regime is capable of, because they were brought to the brink of collapse. And if they had a doomsday weapon that they could use to prevent their demise, they would have used it in the 12-day war.
I see.
So all of these threats are empty threats. and the fact that the United States has a military much more powerful, much more resourceful than Israel. If you put these two pieces of information together, it tells you exactly how it can be dealt with.
Okay.
This regime can be dealt with, is to the best interest of the United States. Another point I have to remind our audience with is that, the Middle East is a region with 400 million people with very good purchasing power, comparable to Europe. The purchasing power of the 400 million inhabitants of the Middle East is comparable to the purchasing power of the people in Europe. Europe, that we really, one of the reasons why United States and Europe are kind of parting their way militarily, if not economically, is because, Europeans have purchasing power, but the European companies are capable of manufacturing and meeting their needs. The Middle East is not like that. The purchasing power is there, but the manufacturing basis is not there. So if we can make sure that the 400 million people in the Middle East, 100 million Iranians and 300 million Turks and Arabs in the region, this can be America's way to decouple from China. During the transition, always, terrible things can happen when you're making a transition from what you're used to new territories. And I think the Middle East, especially a safe and secure Middle East that's open for business, not the kind of Middle East that the Islamic Republic has created, all the war, going on basically in every country in the Middle East, and everybody is hostile to everyone else. The Saudi Arabians are looking into partnership with Russians and Chinese, and the Turks are competing with the Islamic Republic, and Israel. And an alliance between Iran, Israel, and Turkey and Egypt can really bring the Middle East together, and this Middle East can be really America's, solution for transition away from an economy that's presently pivoted on relationship with China.
That's really interesting. So with the we have a couple more minutes here. Thank you for staying longer with us. So with the Iran Phoenix Project Phoenix, they can go. You see, this delay obviously is a bit grieving because of the fact that, as you said, 30,000, 60,000. I saw a figure the other day that could be 86,000. We don't even know what the exact, but it was a massacre. It was a genocide that they committed against their own people. Do you see this delay as a concern? Number one. And number two, hopefully, if the United States does act, and I so appreciate what you said, the blueprint, you're right, the blueprint was there. And I got to be honest with you, I was frustrated with the United States when the president said, I called Bibi and said, turn the planes around. Because like you, all of us believed it was this close. We were this close last June, which would mean that 30, 60, 80,000 young Iranians maybe would not have needed to die. That's where my frustration, though I support, our government to the point of certainly it's a much better government that we have than what we could have had under Kamala or what, was under Sleepy Joe that wasn't even there. This was a point of frustration. And I think as you're seeing in the videos, a lot of Iranians that are out there right now, particularly in the diaspora, are saying the same thing. Mr. President, you said, now act. We support you, now act. So I pray that this delay is hopefully strategic and not, we're trying to find the back door to not do it. Second thing, Reza Pahlavi, how does he get back to Iran? What do you see as just the immediate, because there's still an element that Islamic clerical element that is whatever percentage is in Iran today. I mean, how does he deal with that? I mean, that's part of what the Shah had to deal with, right? With the Savak, with, the claim that the Shah was brutal or authoritative. his authoritative nature was towards the Islamic clerical like Khomeini. And like you said, he should have, I mean, if it was the other way around, they would have executed the Shah, but the Shah simply exiled him, didn't execute him for treason against the people of Iran. So I know there's a lot of questions, but number one, are you concerned about the delay? Number two, how does Reza Pahlavi get back?
Well, remember the last time Trump was in the middle of negotiation with the Islamic regime when the B2s, when the 12-day war started.
Okay.
When he gave green light to Bibi to start his strike against the Islamic regime. So the fact that he's in negotiation doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
If anything, it really means that he needs time to build up the kind of armada that his military advisors tell him he needs, anticipating the kind of reaction that the Islamic regime will have. Because this time around, they know this is it.
Okay.
This is the last time. Once the bomb starts falling in Iran, the regime is finished, because I don't think the United States will stop, or this president will stop the operation until it finishes the regime. And this time, the Iranian people are so furious at the atrocities of the January uprising that as soon as the bombs start dropping, the people will take out in the streets, and they will occupy all the government offices, and the regime will be over. But as far as the regime itself is concerned, and the post demise of this regime, and what we'll do with the remnants of the Islamic fundamentalists in Iran, I think this regime has performed so poorly in the economy. The Iranian rial has dropped in value by a factor of 20,000 times compared to
1.6 million now.
Exactly. Well, 160 million.
160 million, right?
160 million compared to 70 rial to a dollar. And so the families of the members of the military, or even the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, they are, even though they are paid much better than the rest of the society, but they can see, if not themselves, they can see the relatives and the friends and the economic condition. Not just the economic condition, the government cannot even provide drinking water for the people. We are sitting on the second largest oil and the first largest gas reserve of the world, and we don't have enough power in that country. So the economic mismanagement is enormous, and it's understood by everyone. Once this government falls, once the apparatus of suppression falls apart, which can be done courtesy of American bombs, then I think this government will not have any ideologues post, what we call national revolution. This revolution, unlike the last one, which was an Islamic revolution, this one is going to be a national revolution. Post-national revolution, I don't think that there is any threat for the prince or for the people who will try to modernize Iran and bring democracy to Iran.
That's obviously the day that we all pray for. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I try to remind our audience that though much is written about Iran or Persia in the Bible as well, the last thing that is written is the best news, which is that there is going to be a regathering of the people, that there will be a great revival there, a great resurgence there. It's an incredible thing when I remind people that, as I said, that the Bible talks about this throne of the true God being in Persia as it is in Jerusalem. So we long for that day. Yeah. The path through these bumpy days and the bravery. Honestly, I'm as a Christian, as a pastor, when I speak to Christians in this country that are not facing persecution, that are not facing hardship, like Christians in Iran or other religious minorities in Iran or other parts of the world, I remind them, you need to pray for more courage. You need to pray for more bravery. Look at the example of the Iranian people. Look at the example of the young people that are close to 50% of the population. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That close to 50% of the population in Iran is under the age of 30. And you see these faces that went in front of tanks and 50 caliber guns. And we've heard some rumors about, chemical weapons and all. I mean, it's just the brutality, the absolute evil that is now manifest for the whole world. The world cannot unsee what it's seen. They can choose to ignore it, but it is now fully spotlighted. They can't run from it. They can have denied the last 47 years, but now it has been manifest. I pray along with you that Trump will do the right thing, that our government will do the right thing, that Israel will do the right thing, and this will fundamentally change the world. A free Iran. And I can't wait for the day that we can go back to visit, go back to the streets again and see those places. Dr. Kangarlu, Iran Project Phoenix, something that people can go to, read, and hopefully share. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for all the years that you've dedicated to the nation of Iran, to the people, and your voice now. And I know this is just a small show, but hopefully today we've just helped get your voice and this message out further. And please convey, if you ever do talk to the Crown Prince, that we're praying for him. And we're praying for the wisdom of God upon him, that as he goes back, that he would be able to handle the dynamics of what is needed to liberate Iran, but also to turn it into a force for good and righteousness in the world, rather than it being a force for such evil over the last half century. It's incredible to think about. Most of my life has been witnessing this evil, and may we hope for that day. Any closing comments that you'd like to share with our audience?
I just have one simple message for your audience. If you love America, support Prince Reza Pahlavi in his bringing this evil empire down.
Amen to that. Amen to that. It is truly the love of America that leads us to support the free Iran and Reza Pahlavi. He is the right choice. And, I did a show last week. Sorry, just one more thing that came to my mind. I did a show last week where I talked about regret. And I said, I think part of the mentality, because it's crazy to think about young people shouting the name of Reza Pahlavi when they weren't even born, when his father was the Shah. You and I were, but they were not. That means that not only are they having conversations probably with their parents, that means they're studying, they've learned, they've researched. Like, that's remarkable. And they're saying, we want to make this choice. Maybe part of that is because the Iranian people recognize what a mistake was made 47 years ago. I tell this to Americans all the time. These Americans are telling me, oh, this stuff will never happen here. The Marxists, the communists can't take over here. The Muslims can't take over in America. And I said, a lot of the Iranian people thought the same thing back then, right? It couldn't happen. And look what they've now lived under for 47 years. And their message to us is rejected. Free Iran, free America, free Europe, rejected. So I pray that day will come. But thank you so much. Again, neurotherapeutics. I'll say it right. NYC.com. And then IranProjectPhoenix.org. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your expertise. I'm grateful for your message, and keep up the good fight. We are with you. We will carry the voice for a free Iran and for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. We're praying for him. So God bless you, Doctor.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. Folks, thank you so much for being with us today on the program. Thank you for staying with us a little bit longer today. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Obviously, the Bible has a lot to say about the world, about these end times. And though Persia is mentioned as a force coming against Israel, and that Gog-Magog war has not happened yet. It could be happening very soon. We don't know. could be part of this final battle before Iran is liberated. But regardless, God's word addresses these things, and we know that there will be a liberated Iran, Persia, Elam, according to the Bible. But in the meantime, hopefully today has helped to understand how much what happens in Iran's future will impact America's future and Christianity's future in the world, and the access of Christianity into the Middle East. How many doors could be opened by a free Iran for the gospel to go into the Middle East? As Dr. Kangarlu said, the explosion of Christianity in Iran is unbelievable. The fastest growing church numerically in the world. So we don't know how God can use this moment. But again, my message to those of you who are praying, pray that God's will be done. His word is going to be fulfilled. And if it is in his will that America intervene and step in, and the president of the United States fulfill his words to the Iranian people, I feel a little bit differently. I'm not quite as optimistic as Dr. Kangarlu when it comes to whether America will act. I hope he is right and I am wrong. I hope that America will do what they said they were going to do and did not leave the Iranian people hanging to die. As I shared with him, I have deep frustration about the United States intervening and stopping Israel from doing what they were going to do back in June, because that could have saved thousands of Iranian lives. So there's a reckoning for that, whatever the reasons are. But now is now. We can't go back. Now is now. And now we pray that America will act accordingly, rightly, justly, and fulfill God's will. And that the president will hear the voice of God, not the voice of chatter and distraction, or the voice of the Arab Muslim countries who have other agendas. He will hear the voice of God, the true God, and he will hear, hopefully, the cries of the Iranian people to act accordingly. As Dr. Kangarlu said, and I agree, Israel laid the foundation, 12-day war. Here's how you do it. And they were about to decimate that regime. Let's pray they can do it now. Let's pray that it will finish. It will open the door for a shift globally. And that shift will then open the door for the gospel. Because that's the most important thing, right? For us as believers, the most important thing is the word of God and the good news of Jesus Christ goes to the ends of the earth so that the Lord can come back, so that the golden age is not now. The golden age is when Christ returns. The golden age is when the King of Kings returns. And that's what I'm praying for. But this is a factor. This is a piece of the puzzle for opening the door throughout the Middle East, some of the most hardest places to reach with the gospel. This could open the door for a great explosion of the gospel in these last days and the harvest that we've been promised before the King of Kings returns. So please pray. So thank you guys. God bless you guys. Again, if you want to know more about our ministry, tillministry.com. Remember, please, if you're on Rumble, click join, like, and share. And if you want to support our ministry, go to our donate page and give us a one-time donation, Lord willing, either by check or cash. Or if you want to jump in and join our Gideon army of 300 that pray for us on a monthly basis and support us on a monthly basis, you can do that as well. And may the Lord bless you as you bless him. And thank you guys for blessing us and being a support to us in this ministry. Thank you all for joining us today. God bless you guys. I'll be back with you Thursday night, Lord willing, for a live show right here in studio. And if there's anything that breaks between now and then, again, we will come back to you live with breaking news. God bless you guys. Have a great rest of your day. And we will see you Thursday night right here, same time, or not same time, 8 o'clock Eastern, same place. God bless.